Chisako Kakehi. In December of 2013, a 75-year-old man in Kyoto sat down for dinner with his wife. They had been married for just 2 months. He had met her through a Japanese matchmaking agency, and everything about the evening seemed completely normal. Shortly after the meal, he suffered cardiopulmonary arrest. Within 1 hour, he was gone. The autopsy revealed something that changed everything: lethal concentrations of cyanide in his heart, blood, and stomach. His name was Isao Kakehi, and the woman sitting across from him at dinner had been planning this from the very beginning. Her name was Chisako Kakehi. Born in 1946 in southwestern Japan, she married her first husband in 1969 at 23 years old. That marriage lasted 25 years until he passed from illness in 1994. After that, something shifted inside her. She began using matchmaking agencies to find new partners, and her criteria were very specific: elderly, wealthy, and childless. She was not looking for love. She was looking for targets. Over the next 2 decades, an alarming number of her romantic partners would end up lifeless under suspicious circumstances. Her method was disturbingly simple. Kakehi had previously worked at a printing factory where she obtained potassium cyanide, a chemical used in industrial printing processes. She ground the cyanide into fine powder, then packed it into empty health supplement capsules. Her elderly partners routinely took multiple supplements every single day, making the poisoned capsules virtually undetectable. They would swallow the capsule thinking it was just another vitamin. Death followed within minutes, 2 hours. How many times had she done this before anyone noticed? The trail stretches back years. In December of 2007, she gave a cyanide capsule to Toshiaki Suehiro, a 78-year-old man she owed roughly 48 million yen. He collapsed within 15 minutes of ingestion. Remarkably, he survived, but suffered permanent brain damage and visual impairment. He would pass away roughly 18 months later from unrelated causes. When ambulance staff arrived at the scene, Kakehi gave them a false name. In March of 2012, she targeted Masanori Honda, a 71-year-old fit and active man who frequented sports clubs. Honda lost consciousness while riding a motorcycle around 5 in the afternoon and was pronounced gone within 2 hours. Investigators later discovered that Kakehi had already begun secretly dating other men through agencies 2 months before ending Honda's life. She collected roughly 16 million yen from him. Then came Minoru Hioki in September of 2013, a 75-year-old lung cancer survivor who was in good health at the time. After dinner together, Kakehi gave him a cyanide capsule. When paramedics arrived, she told them he was terminally ill with no surviving family and refused permission to resuscitate him. He passed away within 2 hours. Just 2 months later, she married Isao Kakehi through a matchmaking agency, the man whose death would finally bring the whole operation crashing down. The investigation into Isao's death unraveled everything. Police found empty supplement capsules in her apartment. More critically, they discovered a plastic bag with cyanide traces buried in a pot plant at Isao's apartment, one she had tried to discard. On November 19, 2014, Kakehi was arrested in Kyoto Prefecture. Her total estimated financial gain exceeded 1 billion yen, roughly $6 to $9 million, drawn from insurance payouts, inheritance, and partner assets. She lost most of this fortune through failed financial trading and bad investments. At her trial in Kyoto District Court, one of the longest in Japanese legal history, she initially pleaded not guilty, then confessed in July of 2017, only to retract the confession 2 days later, claiming she could not remember making it. The The defense argued she suffered from dementia and had diminished responsibility. On November 7, 2017, Judge Ayako Nakagawa sentenced her to death, calling the offenses cunning and malicious. The Osaka High Court upheld the sentence in May of 2019. The Supreme Court rejected her final appeal on June 29, 2021. On December 26, 2024, prison staff found Kakehi lying unresponsive in her cell at Osaka Detention House. A doctor confirmed her passing at 10 in the morning. She was 78 years old. Kakehi used capsules and health supplements to end lives quietly. But the next woman on this list used something far more elaborate. An entire identity built from lies, designed to lure lonely men into a trap they would never escape. Kanae Kojima. On August 5, 2009, a 41-year-old man named Yoshiyuki Oide wrote a blog post that would become the most haunting detail of this case. He wrote, "At 41, I am actually looking forward to getting married. And today, I will meet my partner's family." 24 hours later, his body was found in a rental car in Fujimi, Saitama. There were no keys in the ignition, no charcoal residue on his hands, no matchbox anywhere in the vehicle. The scene was staged to look like a self-inflicted act, but nothing about the evidence supported that conclusion. The woman Oide had been dating was Kanae Kojima, born in 1974 in the small town of Nakashibetsu on the northern island of Hokkaido. The eldest of 4 siblings, she moved to Tokyo after high school and enrolled at Toyo University, though she would later claim it was the far more prestigious University of Tokyo. She dropped out within months due to unpaid tuition. Her criminal record started early. As a teenager, she stole 8 million yen from an acquaintance with a boyfriend's help, receiving probation as a minor. She was caught shoplifting cosmetics in 1999 and books in 2000. By 2003, she had received a 2.5-year suspended sentence for defrauding 10 bidders on Yahoo Japan's auction site of 1.3 million yen. But deception was where Kojima truly excelled. She created an elaborate false life on konkatsu, marriage hunting, dating websites. She claimed to live in luxury, drove a rented Mercedes-Benz, and presented herself as a piano instructor and food coordinator whose father taught at the University of Tokyo. She used her cooking skills and domestic charm to attract lonely, vulnerable men who were desperate for companionship. What did she do once she earned their trust? She administered sleeping pills ground into food like beef stew, then used charcoal briquettes to fill enclosed spaces with carbon monoxide, staging every single death to appear self-inflicted. She deliberately exploited Japan's high rate of such incidents, where charcoal-related cases were common and rarely investigated with suspicion. Oide was not her first victim. On January 30th, 2009, Takao Terada, a 53-year-old salaryman from Ome, Tokyo, was found lifeless at home from carbon monoxide exposure. 17 million yen had already been transferred to Kojima's account before his passing. Forensic results showed over 10 times the normal dose of sleeping medication in his body, yet almost no charcoal powder was found in his throat, completely inconsistent with voluntary inhalation. Then, on May 15th, 2009, 80-year-old Kenzo Ando, an elderly man from Noda, Chiba, whose father had been a renowned painter, perished in a house fire with traces of sleeping agents in his system. Kojima was caught on security camera withdrawing 1.9 million yen using his cash card after his passing. The court found she targeted him because she feared he would discover she had stolen his money. Oide, the man who blogged about his excitement to marry, had transferred 5 million yen to Kojima before being found in that rental car. Police traced bulk online purchases of charcoal briquettes directly to Kojima. A mortar and pestle with sleeping medication traces was recovered from her apartment, along with prescriptions from at least 10 different doctors. The 100-day lay judge trial at Saitama District Court was the longest of its kind in Japan. The entire prosecution case was built on circumstantial evidence. No confession, no eyewitnesses, no direct forensic link to the moments of death. On April 13, 2012, Kojima became the first woman to receive a death sentence under Japan's lay judge system. The Tokyo High Court upheld the sentence on March 12, 2014. The Supreme Court confirmed it on April 14, 2017, with the presiding judge calling the acts intentional and extremely malicious. As of 2025, Kojima remains on death row at Tokyo Detention House. She is married twice while in prison and maintains a blog regularly updated by supporters. She has never admitted to any of it. Her case inspired the best-selling novel Butter by Asako Yuzuki, which became a #1 Sunday Times bestseller in its 2024 English translation. How many more men might have fallen into her trap if she had not been caught when she was? Kojima targeted individuals one at a time, in private settings, behind closed doors. But what happens when the poison reaches an entire community at once? And nobody even knows they have been poisoned until it is far too late. Masumi Hayashi. On July 25, 1998, a summer festival was held in the Sonobe district of Wakayama City. A residents' association of roughly 200 members had organized the community gathering, and about 20 women volunteered to help prepare communal curry in large outdoor pots. It was meant to be a celebration. The curry was served around 6 in the evening, and families lined up with their plates. Within hours, people started collapsing. 67 people had consumed the poisoned food. 4 of them would never recover. The victims who did not survive included Council President Takatoshi Tanaka, who was 64, Vice President Takaaki Tanaka, who was 53, and 2 young residents, Hirotaka Hayashi and Miyuki Torii. 63 others suffered acute arsenic poisoning, with symptoms ranging from severe nausea and convulsions to organ damage. Forensic testing revealed that at least 130 grams of arsenic acid had been placed into the curry pots. That is an enormous quantity of poison. This was not an accident or contamination. Someone had deliberately set out to poison an entire neighborhood. Investigators zeroed in on one woman, Masumi Hayashi, born July 22, 1961. A mother of 4 and former insurance saleswoman, Hayashi lived with her husband Kenji, who ran a termite extermination business. That business gave the family access to large quantities of arsenic. But this was not the first time the Hayashi household had been involved with the chemical. Before the mass poisoning, the couple had been running an extensive insurance fraud operation, deliberately injuring themselves and acquaintances with arsenic, then filing exaggerated claims totaling over 150 million yen. Arsenic was their tool of choice long before that summer festival. So could this woman have taken things further? The case against Hayashi was built entirely on circumstantial evidence, and she has never once confessed. A high school student testified she saw Hayashi walking around the curry pots like a bear while others were cooking. Hayashi was the only preparer who was both left alone with the pots for over 40 minutes and who did not fall ill after the curry was served. The SP Ring 8 synchrotron radiation facility performed forensic analysis matching the chemical composition of arsenic found in her home to that found in the curry. Arsenic traces were also detected in strands of her hair. Her proven history of using arsenic for insurance fraud established a clear criminal pattern. And yet, the court never officially cited a motive, an almost unprecedented feature in a capital case. Hayashi was arrested on October 4, 1998, initially on insurance fraud charges. On December 10, 2002, Judge Ikuo Ogawa spent 7 hours reading the 200-page verdict and sentenced her to death. The Osaka High Court upheld the sentence on June 28, 2005. The Supreme Court finalized it on April 21, 2009. But the case is far from settled. The SP Ring 8 analysis, the central pillar of the prosecution, has been seriously contested. In 2012, Kyoto University professor Jun Kawai publicly questioned the data. A 2015 peer-reviewed study published on PubMed indicated the forensic data were not enough to definitively identify the suspect. 3 retrial petitions have been filed. The third, submitted June 9, 2021, was brought by lawyer Teruo Ikuta, himself a former High Court judge, making him an extremely unusual advocate in a death penalty case. That petition remains pending as of 2025. Japan's retrial system is described as the unopenable door. Only 5 retrials have been granted for those facing the ultimate sentence in the entire post-war era, and all 5 resulted in exoneration. Hayashi has been incarcerated for over 26 years, making her one of the longest-serving prisoners in the country. Her husband Kenji, now 79 and wheelchair-bound after a brain hemorrhage, and their son Koji continue to campaign for a retrial. Could the evidence that convicted her actually be flawed? Or is she exactly where she belongs? Hayashi's case shook an entire community to its core. But the next woman on this list operated in a place where people were supposed to feel safe, a hospital ward. And she turned that trust into something no one saw coming. Ayumi Kuboki. In the summer of 2016, something deeply unsettling was happening on the 4th floor of Oguchi Hospital in Yokohama's Kanagawa ward. The ward housed elderly patients with cognitive impairments, people who relied entirely on their caregivers. Staff had been noticing a wave of bizarre incidents for weeks. Personal items punctured with needles, nurses' uniforms slashed open, drinks contaminated with unknown substances. Then the patients started passing away at a rate nobody could explain. Between July and September of 2016, 48 patients on that single ward alone passed away. The numbers were staggering, far beyond anything the hospital had experienced before. The first real break came in September of 2016. A nurse accidentally dropped an intravenous drip bag and noticed it foamed in an abnormal way. An internal investigation followed, and staff discovered roughly 10 IV bags with tiny needle holes in their protective filters. Someone had been injecting a foreign substance directly into the drips that patients depended on. Laboratory analysis identified the contaminant: benzalkonium chloride, a common hospital disinfectant known in Japan by the brand name diametol. The substance was readily available on every floor of the facility. But who had the access and the reason to do this? Forensic investigators examined the uniforms and personal belongings of every staff member on the ward. The results pointed in one direction. Traces of diametol were found only on the uniform pockets of one nurse, Ayumi Kuboki. Born in 1987 in Tochigi Prefecture, Kuboki obtained her nursing license in 2008 and began working at Oguchi Hospital in mid-2015. The 4th floor ward was her assignment. When confronted with the evidence, she did not resist or deny it. She confessed. And what she described was deeply disturbing. Between September 15th and 19th of 2016, a span of just 4 days, Kuboki injected the disinfectant into patients' IV drip bags using a fine needle. 3 patients were confirmed to have lost their lives as a direct result. Asae Okitsu, who was 78, passed away around September 15th or 16th. Sozo Nishikawa, who was 88, followed shortly after. And Nobuo Yamaki, also 88, was found in the same hospital room as Nishikawa just 2 days later. She was also charged with 5 counts of preparatory offenses for contaminating additional IV bags that were discovered before they could be administered. After her arrest, Kuboki told investigators she had actually targeted roughly 20 patients in total. But only 3 cases could be formally charged because most remains had already been cremated, leaving no forensic evidence behind. What was driving her? The motive Kuboki gave investigators was something nobody expected. She said her primary reason was the fear of having to explain patient deaths to bereaved families. She timed the contamination so that patients would pass away during shifts when she was off duty, shifting the painful burden of notification to her colleagues instead. Psychiatrist Tamami Katada offered a deeper interpretation, that Kuboki may have been motivated by resentment toward colleagues and superiors, deliberately creating crises during other nurses' shifts to cause professional damage and scandal for them. Kuboki was arrested on July 7, 2018, nearly 2 years after the contamination was first discovered. The lay-judge trial at Yokohama District Court began October 1, 2021. The court recognized Kuboki's autism spectrum disorder as a mitigating factor, acknowledging the condition made her poorly suited for the nursing profession and that her overwhelming anxiety was beyond her own control. However, the court still found her legally sane and fully responsible for her actions. On November 9, 2021, Judge Kazunori Kare sentenced her to life in prison rather than the ultimate penalty, citing her genuine remorse and the possibility of rehabilitation. The families of the victims were devastated by the decision. Both prosecution and defense appealed. On June 19, 2024, the Tokyo High Court upheld the life sentence, and it was finalized in early July of 2024, with 48 patients passing away on a single ward in just 3 months. How many of those losses were truly natural? And how many were the work of one person with a needle? Kuboki exploited the trust placed in her inside a hospital setting. But the next case takes us to a small city in Tottori Prefecture, where a snack bar hostess left a trail of destruction stretching across years, and the bodies kept turning up in water. Miyuki Ueda. On October 7, 2009, a 57-year-old electronics store owner named Hideki Maruyama was found face down in the Mani River in Tottori, in water only 20 centimeters deep. Sleeping agents were found in his system. His car navigation records showed he had visited one particular address numerous times in the weeks before his passing. 6 months earlier, on April 11th of that same year, a 47-year-old truck driver named Kazumi Yabe had been found floating in the sea off Hokue, Tottori. Once again, sleeping agents were detected in his body. And critically, sand was found in his lungs, which was completely inconsistent with someone drowning naturally in open water. Both men had one person in common, and both men owed money connected to her. Her name was Miyuki Ueda. Born in 1973 in Kurayoshi, Tottori Prefecture, she worked as a snack bar hostess at a small establishment called Club J in central Tottori. Divorced twice and the mother of 5. She lived in a cramped, low-rent apartment costing just 25,000 yen a month, roughly $250. 7 people were crammed into the space alongside multiple dogs and cats. She was drowning in financial troubles. Investigators would eventually uncover 16 separate counts of fraud, totaling approximately 9.22 million yen in swindled goods. Inside her apartment, police found a large stash of sleeping pills and pharmaceutical reference books detailing dosage information. Her method followed a chilling pattern. She mixed sleeping agents into food or drinks served to her targets, waited for them to lose consciousness, and then arranged for their bodies to end up in bodies of water where their deaths would appear accidental. Yabe, the truck driver, had borrowed 2 million yen from loan companies specifically to give to Ueda. She owed him roughly 2.7 million yen. Before his passing, Yabe had already survived 2 suspicious incidents after eating food Ueda prepared for him. He crashed his truck after falling asleep at the wheel on one occasion and passed out on a heated table before a fire broke out on another. Both times, he narrowly escaped with his life. The third time, in the waters off Hokue, he did not. Maruyama, the electronics store owner, had a similar financial connection. Ueda owed him roughly 1.4 million yen. Were there more? Investigators had strong reasons to believe so. Akira Seo, a 42-year-old Yomiuri Shimbun journalist and Ueda's boyfriend, was struck by a train in May of 2004. He was found wearing a cardboard box on his head containing a handwritten message about Ueda. He had money troubles directly involving her. No autopsy was ever performed. Shinichi Furuta, a 27-year-old security guard who met Ueda at her snack bar, drowned in August of 2007 after she moved in with him. He reportedly could not swim and was subjected to scalding water by Ueda on a regular basis. A police officer named Huitsu Sakai, who was a regular patron at her bar, was found hanged in February of 2008 with clear financial entanglements connecting him to Ueda. Yet another man, Kazumi Taguchi, who was 58 and lived in Ueda's apartment, passed away in October of 2009 with sleep-inducing agents reportedly found in his system. How many lives had she actually taken? Ueda was arrested on November 2, 2009 for fraud, then formally charged with the confirmed cases on January 28, 2010. Her 75-day lay judge trial, the second longest at the time in Japan's legal history, convicted her on entirely circumstantial evidence. On December 4, 2012, she was sentenced to death. The Hiroshima High Court upheld the verdict on March 20, 2014. The Supreme Court confirmed the sentence on July 27, 2017, but Ueda would never face execution. On January 14, 2023, at approximately 4:20 in the afternoon, she began choking on food while eating alone in her cell at Hiroshima Detention House. Correction officers attempted to clear her airway, but she lost consciousness and could not be revived. She was transported to a nearby hospital and pronounced gone at approximately 6:55 that evening. She was 49 years old. The full number of lives Miyuki Ueda claimed may never be known. But the trail of men who crossed her path and did not survive speaks louder than any confession she never gave. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. Ueda operated alone, targeting men one by one from behind the bar counter. But the next case involves a woman who commanded an entire group of devoted followers and used a completely different kind of power to end lives behind closed doors. Sachiko Eto. On July 5, 1995, Fukushima Prefectural Police executed a search warrant on a house in Sukagawa, Fukushima Prefecture. What they found inside defied comprehension. 6 decomposing and mummified bodies left in various rooms of the residence. The remains belonged to followers of the woman who lived there. She had told the others in the house that the souls of the deceased were not truly gone and might return once the bodies decomposed. And so, the corpses were simply left where they fell. The woman behind all of it was Sachiko Eto. Born in 1947 in Sukagawa, Fukushima Prefecture, Ito had lived an unremarkable life for decades. She married a high school classmate, sold cosmetics door to door, and her husband worked as a paint craftsman. But in 1990, everything changed. Her husband suffered a severe back injury, stopped working entirely, and fell into drinking and gambling debt. The couple joined a religious group, and Ito became increasingly consumed by faith healing. Over time, she began declaring herself a god with the power to drive away demons. Her husband disappeared around 1992, and questions about what happened to him remain unanswered to this day. Ito moved to Sukagawa and attracted a growing circle of devoted believers. Over a dozen followers eventually moved into her home. Neighbors reported constant taiko drumming, chanting at all hours, and rows of parked cars lining the street. When a neighbor confronted her about the noise, Ito allegedly threatened to hypnotize her and cause loss of function in her hands and feet. Inside the walls of that house, Ito had built a world where her word was absolute law. Anyone who questioned her was declared possessed. Her method was a so-called exorcism ritual. She accused followers of being inhabited by evil spirits and ordered them to undergo purification. The ritual involved repeatedly striking victims across their entire bodies with thick taiko, drumsticks during prolonged chanting sessions. The stated purpose, in her words, was to end the impure body and cleanse the soul. Victims suffered internal injuries, organ damage, internal bleeding, and exhaustion. Between December of 1994 and June of 1995, 6 followers lost their lives this way. The victims included Mamoru Miki, who was 50, his wife Kazuko, who was 48, their daughter Sato, who was 18, Kazuko's sister Kimiko Sakin, who was 46, Tatsuo Igai, who was 42, and Akemi Senzaki, who was 27. A 7th person survived the ordeal and was hospitalized, which is what finally triggered the investigation. What drove Ito to target specific followers? The motives shifted from case to case. Jealousy played a role. Ito had fallen in love with a follower named Hiroshi Nemoto, 27 years younger than her. When another woman in the group was perceived as showing interest in Nemoto, Ito accused her of being possessed and ordered the ritual carried out over 3 days. Financial disputes mattered too. Followers who refused to lend money found themselves declared spiritually impure. And pure control was always at the center. Doubting Ito's powers meant you were the next one accused. Her accomplices included her own daughter Yuko, who was sentenced to life in prison, Nemoto, who received 18 years, and follower Mitsuo Sakin, who was sentenced to life. A man who participated in the very ritual that took the life of his own wife, Kimiko. On May 10, 2002, Judge Akira Hara at Fukushima District Court sentenced Ito to death, stating that it is not a religious act to take the life of one believer after another in a self-centered manner. The Sendai High Court rejected her appeal on November 12, 2005. The Supreme Court finalized the sentence on September 16, 2008. Until the very end, Ito maintained her position. She said she did it as part of a religious service and never believed anyone would perish. On September 27, 2012, Sachiko Ito was executed by hanging at Miyagi Prison in Sendai. She was 65 years old. She became the first woman executed in Japan in 15 years and only the 4th female executed in the country since 1950. How does a cosmetics saleswoman from a quiet town transform into someone who commands followers to beat each other until their bodies give out and convinces them it is holy? Ito used belief and devotion to control an entire household. But the next case involves a couple who built a business around a very different kind of loyalty. And when customers came looking for answers, they never left alive. Hiroko Kazama. In April of 1993, a 39-year-old company executive named Akio Kawasaki climbed into a station wagon belonging to a man named Gen Sekin. Kawasaki had purchased 2 Rhodesian Ridgebacks from Sekin's dog kennel business, Africa Kennel, for 11 million yen. He had since discovered the dogs were overpriced and mixed breed. He wanted his money back. Inside the vehicle, someone handed him a drink. He collapsed instantly and never regained consciousness. His body would never be found intact. The woman sitting beside Sekin that day was Hiroko Kazama. Born in 1957 in Kumagaya, Saitama Prefecture, Kazama had been studying to become a land surveyor when she visited Africa Kennel in 1983 and met Gen Sekin. She married him, becoming his 4th wife out of an eventual 7. To show her devotion, she carved a dragon tattoo onto her own back. Sekin was a celebrity dog breeder who had been credited with popularizing the Alaskan Malamute and Siberian Husky in Japan. But beneath the public image, he had deep ties to organized groups, specifically the Inagawa Kai. His missing pinky finger, which he claimed was bitten off by a lion in Africa, had actually been severed as a consequence of unpaid debts. He maintained what he called a personal philosophy with 5 rules, one of which was to make remains disappear. Africa Kennel was the front. The business sold overpriced dogs with false promises of high breeding returns. When customers sought refunds or debts came due, Sekin and Kazama turned to a permanent solution. They used strychnine capsules to incapacitate their victims, then transported the remains to an accomplice's remote property in Katashina, Gunma Prefecture. A remodeled freight car hidden in secluded woodland belonging to a man named Eiko Yamazaki. There, the remains were dismembered. Bones were burned in metal drums. Ashes were scattered in rivers and forests near Ozi National Park. Kawasaki was the first confirmed victim on April 20th, 1993. 3 months later, on July 21st, a leader from an organized group named Yasutoshi Endo arrived with his driver, Susumu Wakui. Endo had been pressuring Sekin over Kawasaki's disappearance. Both men were served drinks laced with strychnine. Wakui, the driver, an innocent man caught in the wrong car, resisted the effects so violently that his convulsions cracked the vehicle's windshield before he succumbed. Kazama reportedly hummed traditional songs during the disposal process afterward. On August 26th, a 54-year-old housewife named Mitsui Sekiguchi became the 4th victim. Her son worked at Africa Kennel, and she had been involved financially with Sekin to the tune of 9 million yen, paid for 6 Alaskan Malamutes. This 4th case was attributed solely to Sekin, and Kazama was not convicted for it. The operation unraveled when accomplice Yamazaki confessed under questioning in December of 1994 and guided investigators to the remote disposal sites in Gunma Prefecture. Sekin and Kazama were arrested on January 5, 1995. The trial that followed was enormous in scope. 105 court sessions spanning roughly 5 years. On March 21, 2001, the Urawa District Court sentenced both to death. Kazama became the 12th woman sentenced to death in Japan since the end of the Second World War. The Tokyo High Court upheld both sentences on July 11, 2005. The Supreme Court finalized them on June 5, 2009. Kazama had been appointed as CEO of Africa Kennel and had faked a divorce from Sekin for tax purposes. Prosecutors argued this proved she was not merely a passive spouse, but an active business partner in the entire operation. General Sekin passed away from multiple organ failure on March 27, 2017, at Tokyo Detention House. He was 75 years old. As of 2025, Kazama has spent roughly 25 years on death row at Tokyo Detention House, continuing to assert her innocence. a claim supported by Yamazaki, who published a book arguing Sakine had coerced them both into participating. The case inspired filmmaker Sion Sono's 2010 film Cold Fish, which transposed the dog kennel setting into a tropical fish shop. Was Kazama truly a willing partner in all of it? Or was she controlled by a man whose personal philosophy included making problems vanish permanently? The Kazama case revolved around a couple operating together. But the next case takes that dynamic to an extreme that prosecutors described as without comparison in the entire criminal history of Japan. Junko Ogata. On March 6, 2002, a teenage girl walked into a police station and described what she had been living through for nearly 8 years. She had been held captive since roughly 1994. The people responsible were a man named Futoshi Matsunaga and his partner, Junko Ogata. What the girl described set off an investigation into what prosecutors would later call a case without comparison in the criminal history of Japan. 7 people had lost their lives, and not a single body was ever recovered. Junko Ogata was born in 1962 in Kurume, Fukuoka Prefecture, into a wealthy family. She was described by those who knew her as gentle and caring. She worked at a preschool. In October of 1982, she began dating Futoshi Matsunaga, a charismatic con man who, from the very start, subjected her to severe mistreatment and psychological manipulation. When Ogata's mother Shizumi opposed the relationship in 1984, Matsunaga retaliated against her directly. By 1985, after a manipulated self-harm attempt, Ogata was completely under his control. Matsunaga used electric shocks from stun devices, starvation, total isolation, and forced involvement in criminal acts to maintain absolute dominance over everyone around him. Experts later compared his methods to those used by cult leaders. By 1992, Matsunaga had stolen 180 million yen through fraud and blackmail. Both he and Ogata were on Japan's most wanted list. Between 1996 and 1998, 7 people connected to them lost their lives, all within the confined spaces of apartments Matsunaga controlled in Kitakyushu, Fukuoka Prefecture. The first victim was Kumio Toraya, who was 34. The father of the teenage girl who would eventually escape and bring the entire case to light. He was held captive and subjected to prolonged physical torment using stun devices. Matsunaga then manipulated Toraya's daughter into believing she was responsible for what had happened to her own father. A tactic designed to bind her through guilt and prevent her from ever going to the authorities. What followed was a cascade of horror directed at Ogata's own family. In December of 1997, Ogata's father Takashige, who was 61, lost his life, with Matsunaga coercing Junko herself to participate directly. In January of 1998, Ogata's mother Shizumi, who was 58, was targeted by Matsunaga, who commanded other captives in the household to carry out the act. Ogata's sister Rieko, who was 33, was next. Rieko's husband Kazuya, who was 38, was confined to a bathroom and starved until his body gave out. 2 younger members of the family also perished under Matsunaga's direction. Every single set of remains was dismembered, placed in boiling water, and disposed of through drains or discarded into the sea. In the entire investigation, police never recovered a single identifiable trace of human remains. The girl who escaped on March 6, 2002, had been held captive for approximately 8 years. She walked into a police station and recounted everything. Matsunaga and Ogata were arrested the following day. On September 28, 2005, Fukuoka District Court sentenced both to death. But on September 26, 2007, The Fukuoka High Court made a landmark decision that would reshape Japanese criminal law. It upheld Matsunaga's sentence, but commuted Ogata's sentence to life in prison, recognizing that Matsunaga had exerted such extreme coercive control over Ogata that she was in a psychological state where it was genuinely difficult to resist or disobey his commands. The Supreme Court finalized both sentences on December 12, 2011, after intense debate among 5 justices. Justice Tomoyuki Yokota dissented strongly, arguing that a life sentence for someone connected to so many losses would cause fair balance of punishment to be lost. But the majority upheld the commutation, establishing a legal precedent that the ultimate penalty can be avoided when a defendant was operating under extreme coercive control. Matsunaga remains on death row at Fukuoka Detention Center. Ogata is serving life. The case inspired Sion Sono's Netflix film, The Forest of Love, in 2019. Where does coercion end and personal responsibility begin? And can someone truly be both a perpetrator and a victim at the same time? The Ogata case showed how one person can bend others to his will through sheer psychological domination. But the final case on this list takes that concept even further. A woman who infiltrated entire families and dismantled them from the inside out over decades. Miyoko Sumida. In November of 2011, a woman in her 40s managed to escape from a residence in Amagasaki, Hyogo Prefecture, and went straight to the police. What she described triggered one of the largest and most complex investigations in Japanese criminal history. Over the following months, investigators would uncover body after body, encased in concrete inside metal drums, buried under floorboards, hidden in harbor waters and remote sheds. At the center of everything was a 63-year-old woman named Miyoko Sumida, and the reach of what she had done stretched back over 25 years. Born in 1948 in Amagasaki, Sumida grew up in a household shaped by her father's gambling addiction, which destroyed the family's finances and left her in an environment empty of warmth. From a young age, she displayed cold and manipulative behavior. She had no friends, was sent to juvenile detention multiple times for confrontations with peers, and intimidated classmates by falsely claiming her father had ties to organized groups. As an adult, she lived lavishly in a 75-square-meter penthouse, reportedly filled with 200 million yen worth of luxury furnishings, funded entirely through extortion, insurance schemes, and pension theft from the very families she was destroying. Sumida's method was unlike anything investigators had encountered before. She did not use poison or weapons. She used pure psychological manipulation executed across decades. Her approach was methodical. She would exploit a minor dispute or a small debt to insert herself into a target family. Through escalating intimidation, she gradually seized total control over entire households. She forced marriages and forced adoptions, creating legal family bonds that gave her authority over finances, property, and even the physical movements of her victims. People in her grip were confined to storage sheds on apartment balconies. They were given 500 milliliters of water per day and a single meal of instant noodles. They were restricted to 2 bathroom visits daily. They were beaten, starved, and deprived of sleep until their bodies gave out. And perhaps most chillingly, she forced victims to harm each other, creating mutual guilt and a wall of silence that made escape feel impossible. The confirmed toll stretches across at least 8 lives and possibly as many as 11. The earliest known disappearance was Yoshiko Hashimoto, who vanished around 1987. Her remains were never found. In July of 2005, Hisayoshi Sumida, who was 51, was found at the bottom of a cliff in Okinawa in what was staged as an accident. Sumida collected 90 million yen in insurance money from his passing. The body of 66-year-old Kazuko Wei was found encased in concrete inside a drum in November of 2011. 29-year-old Mariko Nakashima was found under floorboards, having perished from prolonged starvation and mistreatment. 71-year-old Mitsue Ando was also discovered beneath the floor. 68-year-old Takashi Tanimoto was found under floorboards as well. 16 million yen had been taken from his relatives. 53-year-old Jiro Hashimoto was found inside a concrete-filled drum pulled from Hinase Harbor. And 88-year-old Nori Minayoshi, missing since 2003, was found in a farm equipment shed in December of 2012. 3 more people connected to Sumida remain missing to this day. Sumida and 7 others were arrested on November 26, 2011 on charges related to disposal of remains. Over the following year, the investigation expanded dramatically as more and more victims were identified. Eventually, 17 individuals were arrested in connection with the case. 11 were formally charged. The operation Sumida had been running touched at least 3 separate families, beyond those already identified, and investigators believe the full scope of her control network may never be fully understood. But the case would never see a full trial for its architect. On December 12, 2012, just 7 days after being formally charged with taking a life, Sumida hanged herself using a long-sleeved shirt in her detention cell at Hyogo Prefectural Police Headquarters. She had been placed on watch. Staff confirmed she was dozing at 6 in the morning. At 6:10, she had stopped breathing. She was 64 years old. No relatives came to claim her cremated remains. Her accomplice Lee Masanori received life in prison. 6 others received sentences ranging from 15 to 23 years. But with Sumida gone, the full truth of what may be Japan's most intricate serial case could never be established. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.